So in 1966, you joined the Army, correct?
Yes, yes. I had my deferment from Loudon Board 57, I think it was. Mrs. Alexander was in charge of it, not related to me, and I had been deferred from a terms there at East Tennessee State. And in about February of '66, I just realized I'm just drifting. I am getting nothing out of college. I'm not putting anything into it. I just need to do something in my life to get shaken up. And at the time, that was '66, the war was building up. Johnson was president, and he raised the ceiling level of troops, and they were activating units and all these things to increase the strength in Vietnam. And that was the big talk at college. If you don't do this, we're gonna draft you. But so anyway, I get up the next morning after just a lot of soul searching, I guess, and I go down to Johnson City post office in Johnson City to the recruiter's office. I said, okay, I want to join. I want to. I'm ready. I want to get this over with, and I want to come back and finish my college. He said, all right, so you sign right here. So I had the pen in my hand with a piece of paper there. I'm getting ready to sign it. And as I started to sign it, he said, now that'll be 3 years. I said, well wait a minute. My buddies are going for 2. I don't want to go for 3. I said, I didn't know anything about a 3-year thing. I want 2, and I want to come back and finish my college. He said, well, if you volunteer, you go 3 years because you get an extra year of some specialized training, which made sense. I said, well, he said, it's the draftees are the ones that go for 2 years. And I said, well, Sergeant, how do I get drafted? And he explained to me to go back to the local board and remove my name from the exemption, and then I would be in the list to be drafted. So I laid the pen down and left his office. Didn't sign anything because I did not want 3 years. So I come to the board, do just what he said, and then waited for my induction date. And by that time I'd left school. I was at home in Loudon, and my Aunt Reba Alexander, later Greenway, worked at Montgomery Oil in Lenore City. And Montgomery Oil sold oil products to construction people. So she got me a job with a road construction company just temporarily during that interim time while I was waiting for my induction date. And so I got a job making really good money of picking up rocks and roots and doing whatever the operators didn't want to do, and shovel and all that sort of thing like that. And the road we were building was Highway 321. So I feel like I have some invested in Highway 321 because they were actually built at that time, building that road from Highway 11 all the way over to the interstate, or rebuilding. I guess it was already sort of a road there. So anyway, that then I got my induction notice April. I can't remember the exact date, but it was April of 1966. I was inducted into the Army.
Okay. And when did you, or how long did it take to get into the officer training school?
I was sent from Knoxville Reception Center to Fort Benning for in-processing. Okay. And was there for a few days, and then they took a plane load of us and sent us to Fort Riley, Kansas, all recruits. And at Fort Riley, Kansas, we were assigned to the 9th Infantry Division. Okay. And the 9th Infantry Division was part of Johnson's buildup. He said, we need more troops in Vietnam. Okay, let's activate the 9th Division and put troops in it, train them, and send them to Vietnam. So, different from most people, my basic training was with the unit in which I would serve with in Vietnam. they ended up going to the Delta, if you may or not remember, but the 9th Division went to the Delta. But I was assigned to Company A, 3rd Battalion, 39th Infantry, and that was going to be my home for the whole 2 years. So we're going through the basic training phase of the 9th Division, and I was different again from basic training that you normally have. I was assigned a position in the platoon, and my position was a 90 millimeter recoilless rifleman, a gunner. Okay. And the 90 millimeter is a big old thing about like this, and it's steel, it's heavy, okay. and I guess because of my broad shoulders or something. But anyway, so we had trained. This was going toward the end of the basic training period. And I noticed that my name appeared on the company bulletin board that I had qualified academically on the testing that they do for you to go to Officers Candidate School. And I thought about that. I'm thinking, okay, so far the training I've gotten, I don't think I feel real comfortable going to fight a war, because there was more to come. I should have realized that, but I just didn't feel like I didn't feel comfortable in my skills as an infantryman to fight a war. So that came into my mind. My mother's ancestor, she's a Hambright, and Lieutenant Colonel Frederick Hambright fought in the Revolutionary War in the Battle of Kings Mountain. And John Sevier was going up one side, and Colonel Hambright was leading a group of Germans up the other side. And we were, my mother and I guess, the direct descendants of Colonel Hambright. And that came into my mind, too. I've heard all my life these stories about Colonel Hambright and how he charged up the mountain and was shot, and his horse shot out from under him, and blood in his boots, and all these heroic things. And that came to my mind, too, that and since that time, there's really been nobody in our family, either Alexander or Hambright, that really has done any military duty of any significance, particularly in combat. And I might also mention that he was awarded a saber for his work there, and the saber is in the museum there at the mountain there.
Kings Mountain.
Kings Mountain. Yeah. So anyway, that came into play, and I couldn't decide whether to go, because it had been another year. It had been 3 years, and I was there for 2. Mm-hmm. And so in a little uncertainty, I go to my platoon sergeant, who was a World War II Korean veteran, and he was getting out. He was his time was ending. He wasn't going to Vietnam. And I said, Sarge, I qualified for OCS. I'm trying to decide whether I should go or not. Mm-hmm. He looked at me. He said, boy, let me tell you. He said, you are assigned a 90 millimeter recoilless rifle. He said, the bullet's about this big. I won't quote what he said. The bullet's about this big. And I've seen you shoot that thing. He said, you can't hit shit with it. You need to be an officer. So let somebody else do the shooting.
Yeah.
So that
motivated you.
That motivated me to do it. So finished up the basic training there with the 9th, then went to AIT at Fort Dix, which was the typical standard advanced infantry training, and then I enrolled in the infantry officer school at Fort Benning, Georgia.
Okay. So you served 2 years.
I served about just a hair less. My commissioning date was March the 16th, and going backwards, my induction date was in April the 12th or 13th. So I was about 2 or 3 weeks short of a full year as enlisted. And then when I was commissioned, that gave 2 more full years to it. So I was about 2 weeks short of 3 full years of active duty.
So 3 years came around after all.
It came around after all. But I tell you, Officer Candidate School was the part that I guess there was two things in my military that changed my life. The second most important one was officer candidate school. It was discipline. It was team. You worked together, and it officer candidate school was. I know the guys at West Point and the Naval Academy and all that. They do a lot of good stuff too, but and they got the ring and all that. But the infantry officer school, candidate school it changed my life.
I was going to ask this later on, but this is a good spot for it. And what was the greatest lesson that you learned from the military experience?
The greatest lesson I learned. I can think of several, but and they're all of them are kind of equal value. But I'll tell you, probably the thing that I used the most often in my remaining career I had in the military was that you fight a war the way you train. How you practice is how you will fight. Whatever your habits are you have in training is exactly what you'll do in combat. If you don't train properly, if you don't follow the rule, the guidelines you're supposed to go by, then when you get to combat, because people say, well, I can override, my mind can override these bad habits I got. Well, they can for a few hours, but when you hit the fatigue level where you don't have the mental capacity to control your body, your mind becomes a reactor. It's controlling the reactions, which are habits, and whatever habits you got here is the habits you're going to have that can make a difference in your life and the guy next to you. So I would say that's probably the most important. And the same thing with football.
I was about to.
It's exactly the same thing. You get in the fourth quarter, and you're absolutely worn out, and the first quarter you don't do anything wrong. So it's the training and the practice in anything you do in life is probably the most important thing you do. And of course, the Army or the military is the largest educational institution in the world. If you're not fighting a war, you're teaching. You're doing one of two things: you're fighting a war, or you're teaching to fight a war. So the schoolhouse in the Army was, I thought, well, once you got into the officer level, the schoolhouse was just phenomenal. I just was really pleased with the methods and techniques that they taught you, because it was so important. If you didn't learn these habits before you were in duress, it was too late.
Yeah.
So I guess that's my answer to that question.
So what was your highest rank?
Full colonel.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, 06.
You earned the Silver Star
Mm-hmm.
and the Purple Heart.
Mm-hmm.
How did you earn those awards?
It's the Tet Offensive of 1968, the largest effort that the Viet Minh or the Viet Cong or NVA made to win the war was in February 1968. We had some skirmishes in January, which were kind of a build-up, I guess, to this grand offensive that the Viet Minh or Viet Cong did on last day of February 28th or whatever it was, or February 1st. But when February 1st hit, prior to that, our battles and engagements were in the rural areas, in the mountains, and along the coast. We avoided towns and metropolitan areas because we considered them to be obstacles, and the Vietnamese, the ARVNs, would pretty much take care of the populated areas. They speak the language, they know the customs, and if we go into a town, we wouldn't be familiar with any part of that. So anyway, they worked as sort of towns, if you will, and we worked the countryside. But when the Tet Offensive started, the North Vietnam's plan was twofold. One was to start within the cities, because they knew that if you're familiar with the Ai Drang Valley battle, which was 2 years before, a year and a half before I got there, in which they tried to confront the armed forces, the U.S. armed forces, and they lost bad. Mm-hmm. So since that time, they stayed in small groups. Anyway, so the Tet Offensive of '68 started in the towns. Okay. So we had to come. Our operations went from out in farmland, rice land, into the towns itself. And beginning February the 1st, our duty was to start in the center of the town and drive the enemy out, back up into the mountains. Okay. And this was in a town called Phan Thiet. Phan Thiet was a rather large fishing town on the South China Sea, a beautiful place. If you got Saigon, you just go due east, and right there's Phan Thiet, beautiful place. So that was our base, and so we started in the town of Phan Thiet, pushing the enemy back into the mountains, and we had a number of skirmishes and battles. It was like World War II. I mean, we got pictures of where we blew up houses, and it just was just devastating to the town there. But anyway, the enemy was moving out, and on the 19th of February, after we'd had several other battles, Company A, our mission was to leave our base on foot, go down Highway 1, go into town, take a left on and what's got the town, and cross what's called the Kay Tai River. And the Kay Tai River, at that point, it goes up and down with the tide. It's just that close to the Gulf, to the sea. So the tide was down, and we could walk across. When the tide's up, there's fishing boats and all stuff in there. So we do a river crossing. It's a very wide river and wide open, and so we were exposed quite a bit crossing that river. So the first platoon went across, the second platoon went across, and formed like a little defensive position there on the bank, and then my platoon came second. There's a picture of me coming across that river with my platoon. And it's not real good focus, but there's Lieutenant Schlacks. He was there, and he took a picture of me crossing that river. And so we moved forward once we crossed that river, and then I don't know, this was 8:30, 9 o'clock when we crossed the river, and about 11 o'clock, Lieutenant Schlacks, his platoon's on the right, and he comes in contact with the enemy. He gets wounded, not terminal, he just wounded, but pretty seriously, and so he fights his battle, and we're maneuvering around to try to support him, and then that finally calms down about noontime, and he gets evacuated out. Jim does, because he's wounded. So we're ordered. My company commander orders us to. There's a graveyard there with old tombstones, some pretty good sized tombstones. So we were using this graveyard as sort of a little bit of a shield, because all around us are rice paddies. It's flat as that desk right there, with little dikes that had the little ditches, where the water was in and out of the paddies. So we're in the holding position, if you will, in that cemetery, kind of reorganizing after Lieutenant Schlacks' platoon had been hit. And the battalion commander, West Point graduate, Colonel Elton, and the S3, Battalion S3, Major Mears, were in what they call the command and control helicopter, flying around, and they could see everything below them, So they report to my boss, Captain Gaffney, and they're using code. They don't use my name, but they say, in front of Lieutenant Alexander's platoon, the enemy is running away.